So now we'll move on to a kind of general description of what's advantageous about globalization and about porous borders for elites before turning to the financial networks and actors who really manage this process in the next couple of videos. Uh, in brief, sort of more or less, the migration in the context of liquid modernity serves as a tool of economic exploitation, helping to drive the cost of production down through multiple forms of arbitrage, and then allows corporations access to sell to the most lucrative markets wherever in the world they may be, regardless of where they're doing their production. So often what happens is they'll move production to third world countries and then they sell the products to people in the first world so that they can, buy low, sell high, basically. So we'll go through the various forms of arbitrage, starting with labor. At the core of migration's economic function for global elites is labor arbitrage, which is the practice of exploiting global wage disparities by offshoring production so that you have access to the cheaper labor markets overseas, or by importing people directly from those cheap labor markets into the wealthier nations to work. Multinational corporations benefit immensely from this process. In countries with lots of labor protections and high wages, production is costly. So you go ahead and just go get some workers who don't have those protections and who will work for less, and bada bing, bada bang. Now it's, half priced production. They do this through both formal legal channels and informal channels with illegal immigrants. In the US, agriculture, people like Tyson, construction, Cargill, hospitality industry, they're all heavily reliant on migrant labor. And then on the flip side, companies like Apple have offshored production entirely and use not migrants, but foreigners to make our phones. And this is how they maximize return on investment, both of which hurt American workers. H-1B visas are the sort of high-end version of this process that people are pretty familiar with, I think. Something to be clear about here is that the cost of using this labor for companies is cheap. They do it because it's cheaper. And it also militates against the formation and the function of unions. But if you're talking about, say, illegal immigrants, it's actually not that cheap socially. It's cheap for the business, but not socially. It's just that those costs are externalized onto the public. Healthcare costs, education costs, the costs of jailing them, etc. So not only do we get suppressed wages for American laborers, or in general for Western nations laborers, not only do we get lost jobs, etc., not only is it catastrophic for the culture, for civic participation, for the life of our institutions, but we actually pay for the privilege with our taxes. Then we have regulatory arbitrage, and this is where corporations take advantage of laxer regulatory frameworks, things like environmental standards, working conditions, etc. Like, do you have to provide AC? Do you have to provide access to bathrooms? Can you just dump toxic waste out the back of the facility and that's fine? Companies will also make offshoring decisions, offshoring manufacturing plants and things like that, to countries like Vietnam, Bangladesh, China, where the labor laws are minimal, environmental regulations are weak, etc., in order to reduce costs. They take all these factors into consideration. And then they rely on global trade frameworks to ensure that they can sell the products back to more developed markets in the first world countries. Then we have capital or tax arbitrage, in which these companies and financial institutions, they'll shift capital across borders, allowing them to avoid taxation and other regulations, surveillance on money, whatever. And so these companies like Amazon, Apple, Google, etc., all these guys, they're all shifting billions of dollars into tax havens like the Cayman Islands, into Luxembourg, into Ireland. And so again, they're externalizing costs. They're evading taxation, right? And all these forms of arbitrage, I mean, they're highly lucrative. So the corporations are incentivized to do it. Investors are incentivized to invest in corporations who do it, and it relies on and increases pressure then in general towards more and more globalization, increasing laxity of border restrictions of all kinds. Again, the idea here is just endless, unobstructed flow. You make stuff here, oh, it's cheaper there, so you move, and then, oh, it's cheaper to have my money over there, so you transfer it. Oh, our headquarters should be here in order to get this benefit, this kickback or whatever. It's subsidized here, so we'll manufacture here. Then we assemble over there. We then stamp a logo on it in this country, and then we sell it over there in that market. Oh, now the minimum wages have been raised over here where we were producing, so let's move production again over there. It's just like we talked about with independent contractors and stuff. Nothing is stable, nothing is fixed, nothing has a place, nothing is solid. Companies, particularly the biggest and most profitable among them, the big multinational corporations, are liquid. They want the borders gone. And then also from the perspective of the politicians, they too want the borders gone. Like they're looking at this situation and saying, okay, so we have more affordable goods, the prices of things are down or whatever. We have increased economic activity, we have more and more consumption, etc. So it's great for the GDP. It looks like we're doing awesome. And everyone knows that the greatness of a nation is measured in its GDP. So, the argument ultimately goes at places like Davos about borders and migration. They say, like, one, it's good for business. Two, it's good for the GDP. Three, we're maximizing efficiency and rationality in the processes of production and consumption. And finally, as the UN has explicitly stated, this isn't a conspiracy theory. It's not crazy time. It's not crazy town. If you have a population that's aging out, it's not reproducing, just replace them with foreigners. And again, the incentives here are like, and I think Tucker has talked about actually like companies paying for abortions, paying for people to freeze their eggs or get their tube tied, stuff like that. And it's the same sort of thing. The elites like labor mobility. That's what they call it euphemistically. And if you have kids, if you have a family, if you're part of a community, then you're less mobile. So they don't want you to have kids. Postpone all that, postpone having a family, and become a career woman and a boss or whatever. And if, there are negative consequences of that kind of process for the nation as a whole, for society as a whole, then, and we have, the country is depopulating. So what? Bring in some illegal immigrants and you're good to go. The system will work itself out. That's why we need the porous borders.